Hi, my name is Crystal Fletcher, and welcome to this week's episode of Crystal's All About Books. I am so excited to be speaking with Dr. Nora Gold today. She is the prize-winning author of 3 books, and we'll be discussing The Dead Man, which was published by Anana Publications. For all of the book lovers out there, before we start, I'd like to make sure that you hit that subscribe button on the bottom of your screen. Happy Hanukkah, Dr. Gold, and welcome to All About Books.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thank you very much for having me on your wonderful show.
It's an absolute delight. So, Dr. Gold, I love the opening line of your book. She's never been obsessed before. Can you please tell us the role obsession plays in your novel?
Well, thank you, Crystal. I'm very glad you liked that opening line. Obsession really is the central theme of this book, and in many ways, it's a novel about obsession. Mm-hmm. It's interesting when I look back on it now because I've never been particularly interested in obsession. And it all came about because one night I couldn't sleep, and I was watching TV, looking for something to watch at 3 a.m. And I came across an old film called Play Misty for Me. Do you know that film? I had never heard of it either. I came in the middle, so I had to look up afterwards what it was. And it's a 1971 film directed and starring Clint Eastwood. And he's playing a DJ who gets stalked basically by one of his fans. And I was watching this movie and I was thinking, what is going on with this woman? What leads someone to stalk someone or to be obsessed about someone? And, you know, obviously she thinks this man or his love or his admiration can give her something. But I was thinking, what does she think it's going to give her? I mean, no one can make you what you're not. And so I just, looking at it, since I personally am a feminist, and I thought, well, she's not a feminist. She doesn't understand that a man can't make your life perfect for you. And if she were a feminist, she would not think that. But then I went away. I can't say I got obsessed with the film, but I certainly couldn't stop thinking about it for a while. And I looked around me, and I discovered there were a lot of people whom I knew personally or in my extended circle who actually were on some spectrum of obsession about something or other, whether it was money or career or whatever. And I realized that I had been a little bit simplistic about this woman in the film, and that actually anybody can become obsessed, and that there's a lot more to this topic than I thought. So I guess it occurred to me that really even a feminist or anybody who's very clear intellectually, your heart is something different than your mind, and that anybody can really fall into this trap of thinking someone else can fix everything for you. That's how it all started.
Okay, thank you. And Eve, she's sensible, she's intelligent, she's a music therapist, she's a composer. On the surface, this woman has absolutely everything going for her. She becomes obsessed in the worst way with Jake, and he's an older, well-renowned music critic. So do you think it was the timing of when Jake entered her life, or was it the coming together of Eve and Jake's personality that led to the obsession?
Well, that's a good question. I think you've put your finger really on the heart of the book. I mean, the heart of the book is a mystery, not a whodunit with a murder, but a mystery, a psychological, emotional sort of mystery around what is this about? Who is Eve, and why would someone so capable and strong suddenly become so weak and vulnerable? I don't want to give away the ending of the novel because the solution to the mystery appears towards the end. But a couple of comments about what might have kicked in this situation. First of all, looking at it before we get to the personalities of Jake and Eve, if you look at it societally, which I can't help doing because I have a background in social work and whatever, you know, she lives in a world, the same world we live in, which basically values men more than women much of the time. She grows up in a world in which, you know, there are so many novels, not just Harlequin novels, but plays and operas, films, where it's really normal for a woman to become obsessed with a man. That is somehow a whole trope in our culture. And it seems to reflect the assumption that a woman without a man isn't worth very much. You have to have your man. I mean, that's right. She lives in the real world. This is the world. She also lives professionally in the world of music. And the music world that she lives in, that she inhabits, is tremendously sexist, partly thanks to Jake, who, the man she falls in love with, who's a powerful man. She's a composer, and he doesn't believe women composers. Women can compose properly. So, with the exception of her, perhaps, you know, only who knows what he really believes. So I think there's this whole social context which kicks in. But to come to the personalities of Eve and Jake, first of all, Jake is very different than what he initially appears. He appears like this warm, wonderful person, and he is very intelligent and charismatic, but he's also tremendously narcissistic, which Eve does not realize at first. And I want to say that when we talk about someone like Eve who is obsessed, it's possible to be sort of judgmental, but I think what happens to her is just a more extreme version of what happens to anybody who falls in love. I think part of the psychology of falling in love is that you believe that this person is going to make you what you want to be. You know, the other person, in this case, Jake, becomes very idealized. He's perfect, and his love will make me perfect. He will make me what I always wanted to be. He will make me beautiful. He will make me a super successful, internationally renowned composer. All of these things, right? And that's natural. That's not a sick thing. We all do that. That's part of the delusions of falling in love. I think it's very hard to know other people. It's also very hard to know ourselves. I think part of what Eve discovers in the course of the book is that she didn't really know Jake, but she also didn't really know herself. I guess the biggest challenge perhaps is knowing oneself. But anyway, yeah, I think there were all those factors. And the last thing would be that there are certain elements in Eve's life, as there are in anybody's life, past relationships, past issues that are quite unresolved. And they kick in here also. I think in a way they come home to roost in this relationship with Jake because, you know, her fantasies about herself artistically and sexually and emotionally and spiritually, all of that, when Jake does not realize, act on, implement the promises he's made to her, both explicitly and implicitly, she enters a massive crisis, partly because of her past. And this is what leads to this obsessive state.
Yeah. It's quite a journey that Eve goes on. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, it is.
So, sorry?
I said you're right. It's quite a journey.
It is. Now, this week, what I've done, Dr. Gold, is I put a question out on social media. And if anyone could have an author over for dinner, you know, what would you ask them?
Oh, great.
The question I have for you comes from Paul Butler, and he's from Calgary. And he would like to know, we've kind of talked a bit about it briefly, but specifically, when you sat down to write, what came first? The setting, the characters, or the dramatic situation?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Thank you, Paul Butler. I think the answer to this question would probably be different for different books that I've written. as you know, this is my third, and I've just finished the fourth. I would say in the case of The Dead Man, they all came to life simultaneously, which doesn't always happen. In terms of the setting, that's always interesting to consider setting. This book takes place almost entirely in Israel, which is a place that Eve has totally idealized and romanticized. And Jake lives there. So this idealization of the country and this idealization of Jake actually are entangled. And so there's no way really in this book to separate the person from the place, because she's done this whole number on the whole reality. So actually, yeah, I would say the setting and the characters and the dramatic situation that results from these two things together is really all of a piece, and it all emerged simultaneously for me.
Okay. Now, music plays such a big role in your novel. Was this a conscious decision when you were developing the storyline, or do you think it was an extension of your passion coming through?
Oh, that's also good questions, Crystal.
Thank you.
Well, I love music, but I didn't consciously set out to write a novel about music or about the power of music, which is also what this novel ends up being about. So I think because I love music so much, it's entered my writing always. You know, even in my first book, Marrow and Other Stories, two of the stories in it are about music. One of the protagonists is a classical musician, and the other one is about cantorial music. So there's I guess this comes out, you know, when you love something, it comes out in everything that you write. Regarding The Dead Man, I actually went quite a few steps further than in those stories, because I used music as the structure for the novel. So what happens is, I love sonatas. I used to play piano as a girl, and it was, I think sonatas were my favorite thing. And so I've structured this novel along the structure of a sonata. So the sonata's parts are exposition, development, recapitulation, those three things. And then you sometimes have a coda at the end, like a PS. So that's what I did, actually. And, you know, this form in a way is like, I think, a metaphor for life, because you start off with something and then you develop. And then in the recapitulation, you return to the beginning, so to speak, and you revisit it to the original theme or whatever. But of course, you never really return to exactly the same place. It's more like a spiral where you change, you know, you start here and you go there and you come back somewhere else. And that's what happens to Eve. I mean, she starts off in a certain place. And then through the course of the novel, she develops. And then she comes back to something which is a little different. And even the word recapitulation, I think, is very interesting, because to capitulate means to surrender, to give up. And in a way, she has to give up a whole part of herself and surrender this obsession in order to find her way home. I wasn't sure if I was going to include a coda. And in the end, I did. It's just a 2-page coda. The last 2 pages of the book are called coda. And in it, it's very interesting, because what happens to her is that she hears music, not in what we would think of in music, but in just an everyday sound. And she's never heard music in that particular sound before. And I think that sort of says it all. It's like she's come to a point where she can hear the new music of life and become a new person in a certain sense.
As a reader, I found that part really satisfying, because it was just like, you know, she's coming out on the other side.
Maybe giving away too much. I hope not. But it's certainly, it's not a grim book. No, me too. But it's a book that has reflects a person's inner struggle and journey, but
Absolutely.
there's certainly hope and strength and a lot of love in the book.
Yes, yes. Now, 10 years ago, you founded Jewish Fiction Net, and since then it's published, which I think this is incredible, 400 works of fiction from around the world, and you have readers in 140 countries. Can you please tell us what inspired you to start such a massive online literary journal? Like, it's just taken off.
Thank you, Crystal. Of course, when you start something and you know that from All About Books, you don't know where it's going to go. I certainly would
Yes.
never have dreamed in 10 years it would achieve what it has achieved.
Mhm.
But it's interesting how it started, and it shows how much the world has changed in 10 years, because what I'm going to say is going to sound bizarre, but with the advent of digital publishing, there was a crisis. I mean, we can't picture the world now without digital publishing, but at the time it was so bizarre and so shocking.
Mhm.
And it also had a number of negative effects very quickly for
Mhm.
certain kinds of writers. Anyone who was seen as a niche writer, so to speak, and Jewish fiction was seen as a niche publishing area, a niche publishing field, suddenly found it much harder to get published because the print publishing business was in a crisis trying to adapt to the new digital world.
Yes.
And I didn't have a problem personally getting published. My first book had won a Jewish Book Award and Alice Munro had praised it. I was one of the lucky ones, but I had a number of friends who couldn't get their work published. One of them had been told by a publisher, look, we're all in a crisis now. Put your stuff in a drawer. Come back in 10 years and we'll look at it then. Exactly. She had the same reaction. She basically said, I'm not going to bother writing. This is ridiculous.
Oh,
I can't. And I got really scared. I thought, there is this gold mine, no pun intended, of beautiful work that's going to get lost. Not just because it's not being published, but because people are going to stop writing. So I started jewishfiction.net to make a space for first-rate, excellent publishing of Jewish fiction by writers who were not yet very well known. Because of course, you know, the most famous people weren't having trouble getting published.
right.
At the time, and still at present, jewishfiction.net is the only literary journal in the world, either online or in print, that's devoted exclusively to publishing Jewish fiction. So even when we started, there was a huge sense of excitement in the Jewish world, including in New York. All of the publications covered our launch, and we were able, fortunately, from the beginning to get some of the most eminent Jewish writers alive have published in our journal. Elie Wiesel, Aaron Appelfeld, Savion Liebrecht, A.B. Yoshua, etc. There's a whole long list, which I won't bore you with. So anyway, it's amazing to celebrate our 10th anniversary now, and there's a whole bunch of excitement about it and articles about us. One of the things that has been very exciting for me, you mentioned 400 works of fiction, which is, you know, we're very proud of, but they're not all in English. We wanted this to be a truly international journal. So we have published work, what we publish is work either written in English or translated into English from 15 languages. So this is truly international. I won't, you know, French, Danish, Spanish, Italian, Serbian, etc. I mean, this was wonderful for me. I'd never even known about these literatures before. At the same time, I'm very proud that this is a Canadian journal. And I've made an effort to showcase great Jewish Canadian writers such as George Jonas, Chava Rosenfarb, David Besmoskis, Morley Torgov, and others. People sometimes ask us if you have to be Jewish to publish with us, and absolutely not. We've published a whole lot of excellent Jewish-themed fiction by non-Jewish writers, so anybody can send their work to us, and we're free of charge. So anybody, please check us out, www.jewishfiction.net. And I think, you know, we're living in a challenging time. I mean, all times are challenging, but this is a particularly challenging time. And I think at a time like this, offering people and giving people great fiction to read is more important than ever. And I hope that, in the coming decades, jewishfiction.net can continue to bring to all of our readers illumination and joy, pleasure, intellectual stimulation. As I said, especially in these days that we are confronting now.
Yeah, incredible, just incredible. So a great big thank you for coming on Crystal's All About Books today, Dr. Gold. I really appreciate your time. I'll put links down below in the description box to your website so people can learn more about you.
Thank you.
Purchase your book, The Dead Man, or actually I should say books, and also the links to jewishfiction.net as well. I'll put that down below as a little.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
My pleasure. So happy Hanukkah. And I will also, to all of our other listeners out there, please come back next Tuesday because I'll have another author and another behind the scenes story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Merry Christmas. And
thank you.